Hey, it's Marie Forleo, and you are watching Marie TV, the place to be to create a business and life you love. And speaking of love, if you're someone who wants to have a relationship that actually works over the long term, this episode is a must watch. Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt are partners in life and work. Together, they have written over 10 books, including 3 New York Times bestsellers and the mega hit Getting the Love You Want. Harville and Helen co-created Imago Relationship Therapy. Harville is a couples therapist, educator, and clinical trainer with over 40 years' experience. He's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show 18 times. Helen was installed in the Women's Hall of Fame for her leadership in the global women's movement. Helen and Harville have been married for over 30 years, have 6 children, and live in Dallas, Texas. Harville and Helen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. We're delighted.
I want to be just really clear about this to everyone watching. These two, they are genius. And I discovered them when Josh and I were having a really challenging time in our relationship where it was one of those times where both of us were wanting to beat our head against the wall and we weren't communicating and we weren't listening. And I discovered their work, wound up doing now 2 workshops with them. And I can tell you without a doubt, we would not still have our relationship if it wasn't for you two and your work. So thank you so much. And I've been wanting to have this conversation for so long. So I'm thrilled that you're here.
Well, thank you.
So I believe that what you have put together, the body of work and the tools that you teach, when I experienced the workshop, I'm like, why are we not teaching this in schools? Why doesn't everyone know this? I mean, we had such breakthroughs, and anyone else that I've sent and recommended to your workshop has had such tremendous breakthroughs. So, the times we're living in right now, they're challenging. Tell us about your mission about being, and this was a note that I took at one of the workshops about us being cultural disruptors.
Oh, so you want to start with that?
You're the one that came up with the mission.
Okay. So the mission as cultural disruptors, I think that I need to start with our lane in the bowling alley is actually working privately with couples. So therefore, we're either in a workshop, a public workshop, or in an office. And what 2 things has gotten clear to us over the years, and one is that what changes couples in the privacy of the office or in a workshop is something that can be extracted from that environment and put in the public domain. The second thing is that we became aware that we are sort of entrepreneurial, and we are interested in a new culture, we're interested in a healthy environment. But you can't get that by working just in the privacy of the clinic or in workshops. You actually have to address, I sometimes think, assault the culture itself. Because what was clear is that what goes on in the clinic that people bring as problems are culturally induced. And if you don't deal with the culture that induces the problem that shows up in the clinic, then the culture will keep sending people to the clinic, to workshops, and so forth. So we began to think about moving out of the clinic into the public and beginning and doing what we call relationship education, and do it at such a scale that it could be called a movement, so that you could actually get attention. Not for attention's sake, but so that we begin to rethink the nature of relationship and rethink the kind of environment in which that relationship is possible and can be sustained. So to do that, you have to change the value system of the culture. And the value system of Western civilization has been the individual. And look inside yourself and look out for yourself, and that is the best thing you can do for yourself. What we've discovered is that is not actually right, that we all live in a context, we all live in a relationship, we live in an interconnecting universe. And if we just look out for ourselves, then we're actually going against nature, that when we look out for others, that's in our best interest because that sustains the connection. So we want to facilitate and as much as we can possible and get as many people as we can to join us, because nobody can do this by themselves. We want to move toward creating a relational civilization in which everybody is equal, everybody is safe, and all conversations are safe. It's sort of what we're up to.
So let me just add to that. There's a micro and a macro. So you started off saying, this stuff should be taught in school. We teach so many other things. What's important to people is their relationships. Why don't we teach relationship in school? And the answer is that until recently, the relational sciences have been very murky. There was marriage therapy. People would go to marriage therapy. I did, got a divorce. He did, he got a divorce. It wasn't always a very precise science. And then in the 1990s, there were breakthroughs in neuroscience and a few other things that made it now the marriage therapists are now much more effective at working with the couples. And so effective that exactly what you're saying. It should be taught in school. It could even be taught in kindergarten. And we have a story about that I'll tell you later. But also the big one, Marie, marriage licenses. Shouldn't it be like driver's licenses? Oh my goodness, you're about to make the most important decision in your life. Shouldn't you read a book and have to pass a test before and show some proficiency before you get your license?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, people marry and they just have these terrible wrecks. So, and it's just heartbreaking and their hearts break. But we could teach, before getting a marriage license, there could be some things that are helped, that couples can learn to do, and we could easily lower divorce rate. We could really end divorce on the planet if we did school and pre-marriage work. But so that's the micro of what we're doing. And then I just love that I'm married to this man who just is so cosmic in the vision that it's also so doing couple by couple. It looks like we're doing couples work or family work, but it's toward building a relational culture and a new relational civilization.
It's so inspiring. And again, I've experienced it firsthand, which is why we're having this conversation right now. And I remember when I discovered about safe conversations and about how, because I didn't understand how your work was broadening out into the culture, and I got so excited. But let's bring it back just for a moment to the Imago dialogue process, because I feel like that tool is so transformative. And when Josh and I learned it and actually started practicing it, and we still use it. I can think of, a few months ago, we were butting heads and I was like, we need to dialogue. We need to dialogue immediately. And it took a fight that was at like a 9 or a 10 where both of us felt so frustrated. And within 3 or 4 minutes, we were hugging and I was crying and I had softened up. And I'm like, this is magic. For those who may not have been exposed to your work yet, can you explain just the structure of the Imago dialogue process and why this works like magic?
Well, I'm not sure why it works like magic. We keep getting that report, and works in our marriage too. So we made up theories about why it works like magic. And part of the theory comes from people who report, as you're doing, that it does do that. And so I'll tell you what it is first, and then my thought about and your thought about why does it work so well. It's a structured conversation. That's the first thing. And the structure turns out to be important because most of us think we know how to talk. And it's just like we think we know how to be in a relationship, or we know how to be a parent, or there are lots of things we think just come with nature. And if you have to learn about it, no, I just want to be free and flow of that. But we discovered that in the clinic that couples come there to talk, but if we allow them to talk, they hurt themselves like they do outside of the clinic. So we created a structured way they could talk. And it's basically a 3-step process, which is if you want to talk to Joe, you have to say, is now a good time to have a conversation. That's the first structure, is that you make an appointment. And most of us never do that. we're like, I call it movie house crashers. I walk into your movie house and you're running your movie and you're really engaged, which is your inner world. I walk into your theater and throw my movie on your screen and say, by the way, would you look at my movie and turn yours off? And that's the way most conversations start, is the collision of two people who are in their own worlds. And so if you say it's now a good time to talk, then I can say, well, I'd like to finish my movie first. Or, sure, I'll be glad to turn off my movie and talk. And especially if you tell me what you want to talk about. So it's now a good time to talk about our sex life or where we're going for dinner or whatever you want to talk about. Put a topic in there so that I know what I'm turning my movie off to talk about. Because otherwise I may turn it off and you're going to say, well, I want to discuss the budget or why you didn't call me yesterday. And I may not want to talk about that right now, but I can say no. So the first thing of the structure is...
If you say no,
is the appointment.
then you say when you are available.
Yeah. And which means there has to be a kind of promise and a predictability, which is also creates what we think is the non-negotiable quality of any healthy relationship is safety.
Yes.
I have to know when I'm with you, I'm not going to be hurt by you. And I mean by hurt, not even frowned at, or glared at, or especially talked to in a bad tone of voice, or even worse, bad words, like I'm a jerk or something like that. Then the second, so when you start talking, what's important is that Joe or you, whoever is listening, listens, and that they say back, so they do what we call mirroring. And the mirror is, so if I got it, you want to talk about and are talking about what happened last night at the dinner table, or where we want to send a kid to college, whatever it was. I mirror it back with accuracy. Now, accuracy is a problem because the brain retains in a resting state only about 13% of what's coming into it, because the brain's running its own movie, and it's very hard to let in other stuff. So you have to say, did I get it? And that's the checkout. And Joe may say, well, that was pretty good, or, well, I also said something like that. And you want to get it as accurate as possible because the brain wants to be fully mirrored, doesn't want a partial mirror. And so it's important if somebody feels they didn't get fully mirrored to say, well, that was a third of what I said or a fourth of what I said, but I also said some other things that I would also like to be sure you heard. Could I send that again? So that's the accuracy thing. And then we come to what Helen and I call the magic question, which is there more about that? Well, just even saying it does something, because most people say, are you done yet?
Yes.
Can I talk now? I mean, I would like to talk now, or I've heard enough from you. I want to tell you about me. But if you do that, you activate a defense, and therefore the conversation now has changed, and you're into some competition for the conversational space instead of in a flow. And you know when you're in that, you don't like it, but you don't know how to get out of it.
Yes.
And most people don't know how to get out of it. So if you say, is there more about that? And you say it with interest, the partner's defenses relaxes, because now instead of knowing that you're about to take the reins, they know you just handed the reins back and that you're saying, I'm interested in you. It brings up almost tears in my feeling just to talk about the meaning of experiencing interest.
Yes.
Defenses relax. Then you access words about your inner state that you have not put into words before. And so you discover you're saying something new, and your partner is hearing something new. And so so it becomes a creative process, deepening and creative process. So the person will listen and mirror all that back with accuracy. And when the person says, "Is there more?" and the partner says, "Well, no, I think I'm done. I got all that." Well, let me see if I got it all. I will say, and I want to summarize it. So if I got it all, you said A, B, and C, and so forth. Did I get it all? Yeah, you got it all. Then the second step, those are sub-steps within mirroring, but then the second big step is called validation. Now, validation is a bigger step. I can listen to you and I can get what you're saying and I can not judge it or criticize it. But now I have to say something like you make sense. And that means for many people, if that I disagree with you, therefore you don't make sense. So if when I say you make sense, I have to be clear and you have to be clear that I'm seeing the sense you're making because you have an inner world of your own. It has its own inner logic. And when I listen to it, I will see that you're a logical person. I think we first discovered this in working many, many years ago in a mental health hospital with a schizophrenic who said he was Jesus. And listening to him long enough, I became clear that he made sense that he was Jesus. And when I mirrored that back, he said, well, actually, my name is John. So he recompensated. And then after you say, well, you make sense, you say this, and the sense you make is, I can do empathy. Then I can imagine that you must feel the emotion with that thought that you had. You must feel that. So you do mirroring, validating, and empathizing. So you want to pick up?
Maybe just to add, there's a phrase that I love, that voice without echo dies.
Yeah.
And you may live in a relationship and maybe you don't realize your partner's longing to tell you who they are and tell you what's really going on in their life. But if you've made your partner up and you think you know what's going on with your partner, you don't ask, they can't even tell you how they feel or what they want. So it's beautiful when couples learn to become echoes for them to help bring both into the voice, into their voice in the relationship. And I don't hear you often talk about how when you're being married, often when a person is marrying you and then they say, is there more? You can then say things that you didn't know you knew, like new ideas come up. And so it's really it's really teaching a couple to slow down and become present for each other's experiencing. And everyone is just longing to feel understood and loved and cared about, but also just be understood. And it is a transformational process, as you've said.
And we've thought for many years that you would do that so you could solve a problem. And then we discovered that doing that solves the problem.
Yes.
Because the relationship becomes safe.
Yes.
Because they take turns talking. And it's not okay just to come in and start talking about something that with a tone and a look in the eye that the person feels anxious. It's no anxiety in the relationship. It's learning to live with safety in the between.
Yeah, and being present to each other is the solution, not figuring out a solution.
Yes.
So it's like counterintuitive. And it took us, 20 years of working with couples, trying to help them work things out. That's even a phrase in the culture, work things out.
Yes.
Well, if you can connect through a safe structure of conversation and be present to each other, as Helen said, with safety, without judgment, that is the solution. And you don't need anything else after that. And most of your complaints was missing.
Yes.
And now that that's there, it's like, well, I don't care where we go to dinner.
Yes.
I just love being with you.
2 reflections to share with you. So doing what I do in the world, I have been to many different types of learning experiences and seminars and workshops and have given some myself. And I found it fascinating. I was actually telling my team about this earlier. I think it was in the first Getting the Love You Want workshop that I did with you guys out at Omega. The way that you ran the workshop, it was fascinating to me because it was really about teaching us the tools and the structure. And you were so expert because I could feel sometimes folks maybe wanted to ask questions, and you were amazing at expertly driving people back into the structure of the dialogue. And it felt like everyone's questions melted away, similar to what you just shared. Well, I have this problem. I don't think this is going to work. But if they come back and use the structure, it actually does dissolve whatever was kind of gnawing at them initially. Yeah. And I've also experienced that personally where I'm like, no, I've got to make my point right now. And then I'm like, nope, dialogue. And I come back to it. Yeah. And exactly what you said. We wind up, whatever that thing was, is so far gone and melted. And what is revealed is this sense of intimacy and joy that I think so many of us are starving for. And I also want to say something else in this context, because we're living in such a fast-paced world where we're constantly connected to technology and everyone's constantly looking at their phones and everyone wants something quick, quick, quick. And so I've developed this gift over the past 7 years where I can kind of hear my audience. As I'm having a conversation with you guys, I can also hear people's like, but what about, or what about, and their questions. And so for anyone listening right now who's going, wow, but that sounds like a lot of work, or wow, that sounds so kind of stilted, and to talk in this way feels artificial. And I remember even my own mind threw up those types of concerns when I first was learning this from you. And I just want to say for anyone listening, again, as someone who prides myself on being a lifelong learner and the kind of pace of life that we're in right now, there is nothing more healing than actually learning this structure and putting it to use on a regular basis. I feel like it's the perfect antidote for me in my own experience of the hectic pace of life. And it brings me back to what I most want, which is not necessarily more external success or notoriety or anything like that, but a sense of feeling safe and loved. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you for...
And I have to say, I don't like the structure either. In fact, we invented it and probably didn't actually use it in a regular way for the first 15 years of our marriage.
Yeah.
And we experienced the challenge and the collapse.
Yeah, early on. You want to tell about early on?
Yeah, why didn't you tell them about
you
that?
tell about that.
Anyway. Well, you mean about saying I wrote... Is
No.
it the quote that I wrote this book and I teach it, but I don't do it?
Yeah, no, that was great. Well, that was the other thing that I loved. I don't want to interrupt the flow, but that was the other thing that I loved about your workshop was because, you know, I've, again, experienced so many different modalities, but oftentimes I feel like people who have something to offer, at least in an old paradigm, it was almost as if they know better and they're here to kind of share this wisdom from a mountain. And what I loved about being in your presence was like half the workshop was like, okay, here we wrote this book, but then we weren't practicing it, and here was the outcome. And now we do practice it, and it works, and it was just lovely.
Yeah, you have to get in the trenches, and I'm an academic, so I could figure it out, but but was not, and for a long while was not even interested in doing it.
So shall I,
why don't you do that?
mention something that you were saying just about how artificial it seems.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this structure. And many people respond that way at first. And they go, I want to be authentic. Like, I want to, I'm not going to use a structure. And in our workshops and working with couples, everyone suddenly realizes after they begin using it that it provides safety. And also, I will mention to your viewing audience that men love the structure better than the women. So, hello. So, it used to be that, honey, can we talk? Oh, no, the fear of, oh, no. But if it's taking turns talking, guys love the fact that when they're talking, if their partner tends to be more the talker, that they've got their time and their partner stops their own conversation, mirrors back, and says, is there more? And then all this stuff that men are slow to bring into the relationship, it's suddenly safe to bring it. And they're not interrupted, and they're not told that they shouldn't think that way.
Yeah.
They have the right to their own feeling and point of view. And
I think part of that is that they know what's coming next.
oh yeah,
And,
that's good.
We've learned from the neurosciences that the brain needs prediction in order for it to feel safe.
Right.
So if I know that we're going to have a dialogue and not just you're going to talk, I don't know what you're going to say.
Right.
But if we're going to have a dialogue, I know what's coming next.
Right.
I'm going to mirror, or you're going to mirror, and we're going to do this thing. So it creates safety.
And I also wanted to follow up on what you said right after Harville explained it. You said, now that sounds like a lot. And in the workshop, I thought, oh, but then when you did it in the workshop and you were saying how you were experiencing it,
Yes.
what happens to Marie, we believe, is you said you had all these points you wanted to make to Josh.
Yeah.
And he was now stuck all weekend where you could make the points to him.
Yeah.
But then you were invited into just becoming present for each other. But then it was so wonderful. And yes, we encourage couples, if I were to summarize what you said, to have a better relationship, it's really about shifting from judgment to curiosity and wonder. That we're taught in our world to get things right. We are taught to predicate, like speak words, and our parents are so proud if we're children and we can say words well, or our kindergarten teacher gives us gold stars if we can do things before the other kids, and if we do book reports, and in high school, we get great grades, we go to good college, graduate from good college, making speeches and book, and analyzing things, getting to get a better job, and we're rewarded for talking and making a case well. But no one rewards us for listening, and no one rewards us for being curious. But what our partner is longing for is for us to be curious about them, and wonder what's going on. And I could always throw in then what I was doing wrong in our marriage. Since Harville mentioned, you want to hear about me?
Yes.
And what a jerk I was. So yeah. But for me, when I proposed, and when I heard he wanted to write a book, and he told me what was in the book, and we had been dating, and I thought, I want to help get this book written. So I proposed marriage to him, even though we fought a lot on our dating. But I thought, I just got to help get this book written. And so I also wanted to help him improve his wardrobe. And his social skills. I mean, well, I'm from high society. He's a sharecropper's son. So I was going to tell him what he did wrong at dinner. No one was laughing at the jokes. I mean, they laugh sometimes now, but it wasn't funny. And he thought it was funny. And his parenting skills needed tweaking. And so I'm real good with technical assistance. I'm very succinct and I'm accurate. And I wasn't even going to charge him. But for some reason, he totally was miserable in a relationship. And so one day I realized that he just wanted me to ask him how he was feeling every day, and ask him. And so I suddenly realized, poor Harville, other people will tell him if he has spinach between his teeth, right? I don't have to do that. So it's all about shifting from judgment to curiosity and wonder. And if you do that in your relationship, you begin to have the relationship of your dreams.
I want to move on to one of the second lessons that was huge. I want to talk about how toxic negativity is, both from a neuroscience perspective, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the Zero Negativity Challenge.
Yeah. Well, shall I start off with that? Or would you like to do it?
We don't usually tell the story of the fortune cookie.
Of the
Should
fortune
I tell
cookie,
this?
you tell that one.
No, okay. So our marriage was so miserable that we lived in New York City, top therapist in the world. So I said, Harville, we need to see a therapist. I dragged him to a therapist so the therapist would fix him. And we were smarter than that therapist, so we fired that therapist. And we went to another therapist, and they weren't very smart either, so we fired them. And anyway, that went on. And the fifth therapist called us the couple from hell and said they didn't want to see us anymore. So they fired us as a client. So we had no choice, so we went to the divorce lawyers. And they drew up papers, and so we announced that to our children, and we announced it to the Imago community, the community of therapists that had come together to learn this. And then after a while, I mean, it was so sad, such a low point in my life. And but then something happened, and Harville said, "Look, why don't we try again? Why don't we start going on some dates?" So we went out on a date, and what we're going to do on a date? Go to a bookstore. That's what we love to do. So we went to the bookstore. Instead of going to philosophy and psychology, I said, "Why don't we go to the occult section? Right. I'd love to learn to read your palm." Yeah. And like we can do palm reading and like do something that we don't usually do. And we found a book on relationships.
Relational astrology.
That's it. And so you take his birthday and my birthday, and it gives you a message for any couple. And this couple, and so it said, we sat down on the floor and opened it up, and it said, "You're about to decimate your relationship unless you give up. If with all the scrutiny you give each other." Oh my goodness! I looked around. Who knew? How we were scrutinizing each other just every day. So we bought the book, took it home, and then and I think also we got a fortune cookie that said something about the negativity in our relationship. So I said, "Harville, why don't, at the end of every day, let me get a calendar and let me see if we can make it through one day without negativity." Right. I mean, I wasn't being negative. I was helping Harville. Right. I wasn't being negative, but if it landed negatively on him, the definition of negativity, if you experience something, is negative. You can think you're being funny and you're telling a funny joke, but if your partner isn't laughing, you may have said something that was really negative. Mm-hmm. And yeah. So at the end of the day, if we made it through a day, we'd get a smiley face. And at the end of the day, if either of us had negativity, we did a frowny face. And we just frowny face, frowny face, frowny face. We were trying so hard not to be negative. But that we practiced, and eventually it began to change. And we learned it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You should be able to say anything if you're, quote, giving up negativity. But our process teaches a couple how to bring up any topic in a way that's less negative. And if it's less negative, then their partner, there's more incentive for their partner to hear and take it in.
Yeah, because the negative transaction is, to give it a definition, is a put down.
Yes.
And it can be mild put down, like what? Or a really gross put down, like, I don't ever want to see you again. You really are whatever, and call you by names. And you were talking about the neurochemistry of that, is that it's really interesting that negativity activates the emotional brain, the amygdala, in the limbic system, and just starts squirting cortisol into the system. And the cortisol makes you feel wary and alert and like you're looking for the predator. And it's a very old mechanism in the brain. The emotional brain is the second oldest mechanism in the brain. Anyway, and so when you feel that deluge of cortisol, then you just go into alert, and you obviously then insulate yourself with a protective armor, and you're aware of everything. So you really can't connect then. You can't relate then. You can be tactical and strategic, but you can't be relational, because to be relational you have to be vulnerable, and you can't be vulnerable if you're defended.
Yes.
So it does that, and some people live off of cortisol, and because that's the only stimulant they get, and we want to be stimulated, we want to feel alive, and you feel really alive when you are looking for the tiger that may be going to pounce on you in a few minutes, or in the form of your partner. Don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So the neurochemistry of that is it's not only powerful and self-absorbing. You can't see another person for who they really are when you're into that state. So it's powerful, it's self-absorbing, and can become addictive. So many people, I think what we noticed was that when we finally began to see our relationship, is we didn't have so many problems. We just had a tonal problem, which was how we talked with each other about the problems, made the problems seem monumental,
Yes.
and never solved because we were always into the tone. And as we've been able to sort that out and talk to couples about that, nearly every couple says, yeah, I know that, I get that. And that when you go to a connecting process, even though it's difficult and different and challenging without judgment, then the problem is solvable because you're not having to deal with the emotional injuries you give each other along the way. So we've said it's just absolutely necessary.
Yes.
For a long time, we thought it was like a luxury, and could you ask couples to do that? And then finally, the logic of the Imago system itself is one day said, the logic of the system is zero negativity. It's because it's absolute safety.
Yes.
And you're not safe if your partner puts you down.
Yes.
Or if you put your partner down, they're not safe. And without safety, you can't connect anyway. So you have to take out all of the negativity that triggers the amygdala, because if you don't do that, you will never trigger the endorphins. Because you can't have endorphins and cortisol at the same time. In the endorphins, you have a good feeling, and with cortisol, you have this wary feeling that I'm in danger. So I want to say, and give Helen credit for this, is that Helen came up with this calendar idea, which I hated. It's like, you got to be kidding. We're going to sit here every night, and for a while we did markers, and we'd have a red marker if we got through a day and a black marker if we didn't. And the first probably 3 months, there were maybe 2 red check marks, and all the other
we were trying our best.
88 were black. But we got 2. So if you get 2, you can get 3. Yeah.
And we're marriage experts.
You have to keep reminding us of this. But this one thing is that we don't ask couples to do anything we haven't done. And especially anything that doesn't work.
Yes.
Because we tried it all on ourselves. I think Helen says in public that if you think your marriage is bad, you should see our marriage. And if you think you can't make it, we made it, you can make it.
And by the way,
you can't get much worse.
We have the marriage of our dreams now.
Yes.
It just took a while.
Yeah.
But every day, I'm just the luckiest woman on the planet.
Yeah.
Waking up, and I tell him that at least twice a day.
Yeah. Well, it's mutual. Just to have a partner, I mean, this is the other thing of graciousness and gratitude. Just have a working partner, not somebody who says, well, you do the best you can and I'm going to be myself. But, you both have to agree that you're going to, ride this donkey together.
Yes.
And we call that a conscious partnership. It's not a competition. It's a partnership. And so you have to engage in the same behaviors. And, you're going to blow it, but you have a partner who says, well, let's try it again.
Yep.
Instead of, I'm out of here or whatever.
Well, and the donkey happens to be learning to love, which is like the most important task we're given as human beings, is trying to learn to love someone. And, in most of the great world religions, that compassion is the highest form of human potential. Any of the world religions, and being raised Christian, I think Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? There were 10 commandments. And he said there are 2 commandments, and they're equal. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. It's all about love.
Yes.
And I'm married to someone who has learned to help people learn love. Keep the love of romance instead of, inevitably, the romantic love turns to disillusionment. But it's cute, the donkey image. I think donkey, we're riding a donkey together.
Just a metaphor.
But Jesus was on the donkey.
And I wasn't thinking of
anyway.
Jesus.
But I was thinking of Jesus.
Get in the buggy,
Yeah.
something. But you got to get in together and close the door and say, we're not getting out of this buggy.
Yep.
And no matter how bad it gets in here. And you know what happens when you do that? You say, well, if it's not going to get, if we can't get off this train,
Yep.
I think I'm going to have to change.
Yes.
Because I don't want to live the way we're living.
Yes.
Because I've always had an exit. And in which, 50% of couples take is the divorce. And we went actually to the divorce papers. But if you say, I'm not getting off the train, then it has to get better. And that's one of the benefits of closing the door to the exit.
Yes.
And something happens then in your brain, because the brain's always wanting to get out of the pain too. Mm-hmm. But if there's no way off this train except to change and make it safe here, mm-hmm. then all of your creativity will begin to move into the direction of the welfare of the brain, because the brain wants to be safe, because it knows that's the only way it will survive.
Yes.
Or thrive. It can survive without safety, but it can't thrive without safety. And it doesn't want to just sit there, surviving, because the brain's got stuff to do unless it's scared. And then it only has one thing to do, stay alive.
Yes.
And if it doesn't have to stay alive, then it's got lots of things to do, like creativity and exploration and curiosity. And that's our true nature when it expresses itself until the negativity comes.
So when Harville was doing this a minute ago, when I kept asking him, what would he write in his book, and and we kept dating, and I said, finally, oh, Harville, this reminds me of Martin Buber. And he said, I don't like Martin Buber. No, what is this? What does it remind you of? And I said, well, Martin Buber, the Jewish mystic, said that if two people learn to shift from treating each other as an I-it, like you're an it to make my life happy, and maybe you feel the same, and to an I-thou, where two people learn to serve each other. Buber says that the universal energies begin to flow through the two people and into the space between. And he said, oh, that's gobbledygook. Back then when I first raised it. But then more and more, began to take that idea, and really that's how Harville is sort of understanding that the power isn't necessarily me getting mentally healthier fixed by a therapist, or Harville fixed by a therapist, or his a spiritual retreat or a psychology retreat or whatever. It's not either of us getting fixed, but if both of us learn to fix the between, the collateral is we get healthier, but it's the between that needs doctoring. Mm-hmm. And Harville is so brilliant at saying simply what is needed to help couples connect. And he has now moved, the theory's matured, where it's really about taking care of the between.
Yes. And I think that's a great place to start talking about your work with communities and Safe Conversations 360. I was on the website, which, by the way, looks fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Doing such a great job. And I felt like there were some very sobering stats on the website that I pulled, just in terms of the state of relationship in our lives and the impact that negativity and having negative relationships chronically over the long term can have on us as individuals and as a society. You have 100% of people in a negative relationship have a greater risk of cardiac death. That's 100%. Mm-hmm. So 100% of people in a negative relationship have a greater risk of cardiac death, and a 60% drop in productivity as a result of a breakdown in the marriage. There was also one other thing, that the breakdown of relationships leads to the breakdown of family, which leads to the breakdown of our economy, which leads to the breakdown of our culture. Yes. Do you want to tell us about your work that you're doing now to take this again out of the clinic and kind of beyond individuals and more towards society?
Yeah. And I'd like to start it by saying that in 1977, we actually began this work in Helen's living room, when we were in one of our meltdowns. And Helen said, why don't we just stop and one of us talk and the other one listen? And so I'm a therapist, and go to my office that day, or had just come from it. But that was the beginning of the dialogue process. And then we experimented with it and introduced it to couples, and couples gave us feedback, and we finally got these 3 steps that I was talking about. And that became the therapeutic intervention in Imago. And that's what we became clear is, in fact, there was a research project with kindergarten kids in Israel long ago now, and they taught kindergarten kids dialogue. And these kids were picked it up and began to train their parents in dialogue. They wanted their parents to listen, and they would say to their parents, "Mirror me, mirror me." And the parents had been given enough information to know what the kids were doing. And these kids were followed all the way through to high school. And they had and nobody else in the school learned this. This was just one class, one researcher who wanted to see this. If they'd known what was going to happen, they'd probably taught the whole school. But this one class were the most relationally competent and emotionally resilient class in the school. They stood out as being, just human beings who knew how to operate with other human beings and to thrive. So that was long ago, and we didn't do much about that. We just said, "Oh, that's really interesting." But things like that began to help us understand that dialogue, which we rebranded as Safe Conversation for the Dallas Project and for this project, could become the language of everybody. That talking is the most dangerous thing people do, and listening is the most infrequent thing people do. And when you talk with judgment, then you will polarize. But if you can talk without judgment, you can connect beyond your differences. And that difference is the big challenge everybody has. I mean, how am I going to deal with you if you are African American, if you're a Muslim, if you're evangelical Christian or a Democrat or Republican? Everybody's different. Everything in the whole universe is different. And there's no particle like another particle. Similar, but not identical. So the difference is the nature of nature. But there's a push on the human side of nature that you have to be like me in order for you to be accepted by me. And so, our group is the group, and we see the things. So about, what was it, about 7 years ago? Why don't you pick up on that?
So about 7 or 8 years ago, Harville had this vision. He had said earlier, "Helen, don't people get it? The healthy couple is the upriver prevention that prevents downriver cleanup." I thought it was amazing when he said that, that we wouldn't have to put funding into chemical addiction and teen pregnancy and street gangs and all if kids liked being at home and they retain what they learn at school, and they'd be better students if their parents weren't fighting. So I just thought that was so awesome. He said that. But then he said, "It's gotten so lasered and simple. Let's get this out of the clinic and into the culture." And he suggested we pull together the other top relationship scientists in the culture. We contact John and Julie Gottman, Sue Johnson, and her beloved, who's the businessman working with, behind her wonderful therapy, Ellen and Pete Bader, Dan Siegel, an interpersonal neurobiologist, works with couples, and his wife. And we met about, and maybe 2 or 3 others, and we met, and they said, "Yes, this shouldn't just be in the therapy offices. Let's get it out." So we met twice a year. And they decided that Harville and I should go and experiment in one city and see if we could get it into one city. And maybe after that city, that they would do it, we'd get a documentary done, and it would go to other cities. So we went to Dallas about 4 years ago, And we didn't want to start an organization. We just said, does anyone want this workshop? We have a 5-hour workshop. We had reduced our 18-hour workshop to 5 hours. And the low-income part of Dallas wanted it. They said, let's take your workshop. We'll do a Spanish translation of the PowerPoint slides and of the manual. Harville and I made little cartoons, and we gave it to 50 couples, and that they had simultaneous translation there. I didn't realize, I thought more would be bilingual than there were, but really most of them didn't speak any English, and several of them couldn't even read. And out of that 50 couples, they loved it. 5 hours later, it was like, oh, wow. And we had provided daycare. So we started doing, they said, you changed our marriage. Our whole community needs this. Please do this again as soon as possible. We'll bring our friends. So a month later, Pinkston High School, the low-income part of Dallas. And then it began to, 6 months later, the mayor heard what we were doing. And he said, he invited us to be on the mayor's poverty task force. So they get it that strengthening the family strengthens the economics of the city. And the breakdown of the family exacerbates the downward spiraling of poverty. And so, you want to take over from there?
Well,
we now have a training program.
No.
People are coming to get trained in teaching this in their different ecosystems. And in addition to dialogue and teaching a couple to problem solve together, called Converting a Frustration into a Wish, you learn to ask for what you want in a healthy relationship. We teach communologue, where people can do this in groups. So people are coming from, they're coming and then they're taking it to the police stations and to schools, and they get training.
And to veterans.
Yep. And all parts of Dallas. There's a Chinese group in Dallas, and an Indian community in Dallas. And by popular demand, these sentence stems that Harville said was the 3 steps of dialogue, they've now been translated into
11 languages.
11 languages.
In Dallas.
In Hebrew, in Farsi, and people said, not only are you fixing the distance between the couple, there's so much turfism in Dallas. And there's a low-income community in Dallas and a wealthy. It's called the Tale of Two Cities. Dallas is sort of doesn't like that they feel like they are the Tale of Two Cities. And people have told us you're now healing the connection between the different parts of Dallas. So it's just such beautiful work. So
the numbers have grown. We started off with 50. And then we got it to about 1,000 couples, which was really amazing that you can actually, it was a condensed workshop like the one that you went through, but I think it was a 6-hour workshop in a huge coliseum. And then we streamed it, discovered streaming. I didn't know much about streaming. And so the executive director who was doing that streamed it. And I think now it has been picked up in 175 countries.
Brilliant.
By over 500,000 people. So what's exciting about that is that what helps a couple in the clinic will help anybody in any ecosystem. And if you improve talking, i.e. without judgment, so that you can connect, you actually help satisfy the deepest yearning of the human heart. And it's sad that we human beings don't know naturally how to do that. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn that, just like you have to learn how to be married.
Yeah.
You don't know how to be married.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to talk.
Yeah.
And so what works there? And you were giving those statistics, which I'm delighted that you have put out, because I don't carry all those numbers around in my head. I just know that the negativity in relationships that produces stress in marriages, produces stress in kids, is the source of at least 9 major social human problems, all the way from divorce to domestic abuse, children's functioning in school, addictions, violence, crime. Just go on down the list, that we pour money into the symptom. You can't fix this problem by treating symptoms. You can maybe reduce the symptom for a little while, but the cause is the stress in primary relationships. And that stress shows up in a corporation, in the way the bosses and employees relate to each other, or the way the bosses relate to each other. There's a family overlay, because everybody comes out of a group called a family, and they take that into their workplace, into their worship place, into the learning place, and all kinds of things happen, and you wonder, what is going on here? Well, what's going on here is the past is repeating itself in the present. And the past doesn't know how to connect. It doesn't know how to relate. We lost that early in childhood. And the human race has not generically across generations known how to be safe. Obviously, we wouldn't have a civilization built on war, which we do have. Although there is now a new theory out that I really love, which is that civilization did not progress by war. It would progress by the common people between the wars who created new communities of empathy and stabilized. The war was a disruption of that. So there's something in us that knows what we need, but not in us the skills to know how to get what we need and sustain it. So Helen and I, we're older, and we won't say how old, and we've already run our labs, and we don't really have anything else we have to do, because I don't know if we even want to do it, but we just decided we would we'd test this, and so we tested on a whole ecosystem the size of a city, and so it's moving through that city, and as a result of the exposure through the streaming, it's now participated in by 7 countries, 38 states, and I think about 450 people have decided to be trained leaders to pick it up and start delivering it in their ecosystems, in their cities, in their states.
It's really sort of bizarre. The work in Dallas has parts that are hard to it, particularly explaining to people what it is we do.
Yeah.
Like, we love you for many reasons, but part of it is you get the importance of this.
Yes.
But what is so easy and rhapsodically wondrous is the training program. We haven't put money into getting a sophisticated training program. It's our, agenda we type up the night before, and just PowerPoint slides, and little money in marketing. I mean, the last workshop, a woman I didn't even know, she came in from Singapore. She flew in. We usually only have about 30, 35. But they fly in a couple recently flew in from Switzerland into the training program. Mm-hmm. And we have, one of our trainees who flew in from New York, Pollyanna and Baldwin, they took it to Africa, and they did it where?
South Africa.
Yeah, there's some, sorry, I don't know the name of the country. But then, like, one woman came from the Chinese community in Dallas, but then she took it to China, and another took it to the Indian community in Dallas, but then she went to India and taught it in a school there. So, like, this little work we're doing, it's the Holy Spirit, like, flapping her wings just all over the place. That's sort of how I think about it. So, because it's all unanticipated. Like, we had no idea that our little effort in Dallas would attract interest so far and wide.
Well, I hope that it continues to. I want to let you finish. I feel like you have one more thing, Harville. Yes, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that we have enough sort of proof now,
Yes.
and credibility that we're getting ready to go to scale. And we don't quite know what that means, but it means that we only have 9 billion customers on the planet that we have to get to. Everybody talks.
Yeah.
And hardly anybody listens. So what we do, and when people want to know, what do you do? There's some people asked me the other day, what do you do? I said, I help people talk without polarizing. And that's what we do. And so it's not complicated. It's just hard to learn. It's hard to practice. It's hard to sustain it.
Well,
but it's that simple.
Yeah, it's
Be
simple.
able to talk to another human being without pissing them off. and connecting with them so that you feel safe with that person and they feel safe with you. That is the desire of the human heart. I'm sure that's what our true nature is. And that's why we work so hard. Everybody works so hard to try to do it, but without the technology, they blow it. Yeah. And so this simple technology helps people do something that is our nature.
It is simple. That's his gift. We've been called the Steve Jobs of relationship. Like we take something murky and and he gets the credit. But I asked him if we could write a book, Making Marriage Simple. That's sort of for the truck driver.
I'd like it too, by the way.
And have cartoons, like just simple,
absolutely.
Not the theory, and getting to love everyone. But it's hard to internalize. You have to practice. If you practice it, you can do it.
Yes.
But it's not like it comes naturally. So you're really rewiring your brain, shifting from that lower brain to the upper brain where you can problem solve and collaborate.
Yes.
Anyway.
So I want to thank you guys so much from my heart to yours for the work that you do. Thank you guys. I'm telling you, everyone who's watching this right now, we'll put links to their books. Anytime that you guys do Safe Conversations, I know there was one last year around Thanksgiving that we broadcast out.
Oh.
And
Thank you.
Yes. I know some people in our audience, actually, they wrote to me. They're like, that was amazing. So I'll continue to support your work.
Thank you.
And just thank you for being you and for the difference that you're making in the world.
Mm.
Thank you for having us on and to be with you and to be able to talk about it. We appreciate you.
An honor to be here.
You're on the journey with us.
Now, we would love to hear from you. Out of all the amazingness that you just heard, what's the single biggest insight you're taking away? And most importantly, how can you put that into action starting right now? Now, as always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at marieforleo.com. So go there and leave a comment now. While you're there, be sure to subscribe and become an MF Insider. You'll get instant access to an audio I created called How to Get Anything You Want, plus some exclusive content, special giveaways, and some personal updates from me that I don't share anywhere else. Stay on your game and keep going for your dreams, because the world really does need that special gift that only you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Marie TV. B-School is coming up. Want in? For more info and free training, go to joinbschool.com.
We're rewarded for talking and making a case well, but no one rewards us for listening, and no one rewards us for being curious. But what our partner is longing for is for us to be curious about them.